so I think just coming on to sort of some more sort of practical things about what's happened. So obviously we had quite an interesting budget this year. We did a big session when the budget came out. And I think there are lots of changes coming up, obviously things like change the corporation tax and some bit of respite in some areas. I think we've obviously just been talking about, planning ahead for personal tax and things like this, but obviously we think there are potentially some quite big changes coming. This has been a very, very expensive year for government, very expensive year for the country. I think we'd probably be very remiss to say it's all going to be fine, we don't have to worry about any of that debt. It's coming to it. So I think what sort of things about, obviously, listen, we don't have a crystal ball, but I think there's future change, things that we might need to be prepared for, particularly either in the next year, maybe the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, do you have a particular view about what kind of impacts there might be for business owners as a result of what's happened over this last 18 months or so?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. It is inevitable tax rates have to go up because there is a huge bill to be paid. Now, there's lots of ways they can pay it. They can treat it like a war debt, as they did after the First and Second World War, and spread it over several generations. But ultimately, the only way to pay that back is to take more money off people. The policy at the moment seems to be kick the problem down the road, which I agree with. They're pushing the problem forwards to allow businesses to recover. If they were too painful, we would have seen thousands of business failures by now, tens of thousands of business failures, because I can't keep people on, furlough doesn't exist, I've got to make them redundant. Unemployment would have been £3 or £4 million by now. So the strategy of shove it into the future is absolutely right, but they haven't solved the problem. They've just shoved it into the future. So at some point, they do have to recoup that spend. Their starting point, which they've already flagged up, so not until 2023, is corporation tax rates go from 19 to 25. That's a big jump, 19 to 25, especially as it was intended to be 17. That was what they had previously stated. So that's quite a big backward step for the government, but no real choice. It's still, by comparison to other countries, a comparatively low corporation tax rate. And they've given us plenty of warning it's coming, so we're all ready for it. It gives you a chance to manage your profits earlier and take more profits sooner and pay less tax. And they've offset that with this super tax deduction, where if you spend money on the right assets and equipment, you get 130% tax relief, which again, I think is really positive in the sense of, if you want to hoard your money, we're going to take a slice of it. If you want to invest your money, you can have a better deal. I think that's absolutely right. That's a good strategy for government. The interesting thing about the 25% corporation tax rate is we, like most accountants, have spent the last 20 years saying, don't take it as a salary, take it as dividends, much more tax efficient. That is going to change when corporation tax rates go up to 25%. And it's a very complicated transaction, so I'm not going to go through the details, because some dividends are tax-free, some dividends are lower rate, some dividends are higher rate. Your earnings, when you hit the higher rate thresholds, and actually they've got a stealth tax by not moving the tax thresholds for the next good few years. So whilst it doesn't feel like tax rates have gone up, they have in real terms. But when you get to certain rates of income, you then start to lose your personal allowance. So it's very complicated exactly what money you take out and how you take it out. But for a chunk in the middle, what used to be more effective as a dividend tax because there was no national insurance on them is now better as a salary, because yes, you pay national insurance, but you're now getting 25% tax deductions instead of 19% deduction. So the sweet spot is about 5% better between salary and dividends. And I think most clients, most accountants are going to miss that, because we've spent so long saying dividends, dividends, dividends. And the tax man's been fighting us every step of the way, saying we don't like dividends because we don't get as much money. Now, actually, it's going to be salaries for the majority of high earners. That's going to be the priority. But it is going to be very complicated. So corporation tax, I think it's right. You know, if you invest your money, you'll pay less than if you don't invest your money. I think that's right. But that's going to be a big shock for some companies. Of course, you only pay if you're making more than 250,000 of profit. Less than 50,000, it's the same rate of 19. In the middle, it's a variable rate depending on what you make. I think that's a sensible balance of it's coming, be ready for it. You know, go and make money and invest it, and we'll leave you alone. The other areas where I think they're easy targets are capital gains tax, as I said just now. It has to go up. It's such a soft tax regime for selling of businesses, 10% on some of it, 20% on the rest. I think that has to go up. How far it goes up and how fast it goes up, I don't know. But therefore, the same conversation just now of if you're waiting to get more money and the tax rates go against you, you might end up with a higher proceeds and less net proceeds, because the taxman has a bigger slice of it. That is definitely coming. Inheritance tax, again, it's a soft target. I don't know what they would do to inheritance tax, but you don't lose many votes by taxing dead people. So it's a good political game for the chancellor. So inheritance tax, I think it will get softer, tougher. I think they'll want a bit more money off people. Probably the thing for most of your members that I think is really critical is the taxman's going to get nastier. He won't say it's nasty. He'll say he's doing the job of collecting money on behalf of taxpayers. But in the budget, they announced a fairly chunky amount of money to create more tax investigation teams. They're really going to dig. Now, if you follow the rules, you're absolutely fine. But actually, what that tends to do is discourage the vast majority of businesses from trying anything adventurous on tax. Because they're so worried about that aggressive approach. So even if the aggressive approach doesn't actually find many problems, it simply stops people doing quite routine tax planning for fear of being investigated. So I think what you'll find is a lot more aggression from HMRC, and that will make a lot of people avoid doing even basic, simple, mundane, quite legitimate tax planning because they don't really want to get into an argument with HMRC. Does that make sense?
Definitely, I think we've we've had our fair share of conversations with HMRC over the last year as the BPMA as it's adjusted, and it's very interesting. The approach is a very confrontational one, even to our because technically we're a relatively small business in the grand scheme of things, but it's really quite aggressive. And I think we're an easy sector to bully, and I think I think it's often it's the rational approach and. Make sure the things are set out in black and white. I think always my biggest bit with HMRC, whenever I've been approached in my previous business lives, has always been to set it out in black and white and almost present the situation back, because as long as you're prepared and you've got the right answers, it will tend to throw them because they think you're going to panic and say something that you shouldn't. But,
well, yeah, that's definitely true. I think just on the tax investigation side of things, I think there's two things to understand on tax investigations. One is the most likely outcome is they ask you to pay the tax you would have paid had you not done what you did. The number of people who pay penalties, the number of people who get, criminal sanctions are ridiculously rare, and you've got to be a persistent and criminal offender to get to that. In the vast majority of cases, they go, well, that's not acceptable. We want our money, and you go, okay. That's money I would have paid you 2 years ago if I hadn't done what I did. So the downside of losing an argument with HMRC actually is emotional aggravation, fear and stress and pressure. A good accountant should take that from you. We'll deal with HMRC, leave it to us. So the downside of doing stuff and losing is pretty low in most cases, but people don't do it for fear of that uncertain consequence. The second point is, which is really important, is that they have this thing up their sleeve called GAAR, General Anti-Avoidance Rules. And basically, if you do something where the prime objective or the sole objective is to reduce your tax bill, it doesn't matter whether you've done it within the letter of the law. They can just say, we don't care. You did it to save tax. That's not allowed. So you have to make sure anything you do says, no, we're doing this because it reduces our risk, enables us to raise money, enables us to bring the team in, diversifies my wealth. There's got to be a range of commercial things that you then go, oh, and it's a bit more tax efficient. If tax is number one on your list, then you're a good chance of failing on that approach. And that's quite frustrating when you could follow the letter of the tax rules and still fail. And it doesn't make sense to many of the clients I talk to. They go, but I did exactly what it said. Yeah, but you only did it to save tax, therefore they can ignore it. So that's what we find sometimes when things go wrong is, for example, if we were doing a research and development tax claim, we would produce a 20-page report now, even though we think it will never be asked for, because if it is ever asked for, we go, yep, there you go, there it is, there's a document. And all the commercial justifications are in there, all the evidence is there. If you just go, oh, do this, and it'll save you some tax. 3 years down the line, they go, so what did you do? Oh, hang on a minute, I can't remember what we did.
Exactly, you're going to remember what those things are. I think R&D claims have been something this part of, particularly members have been really keen. Yeah. It's been great for them to get those R&D claims coming through.